Hi, and welcome to the Starseed Kitchen podcast. I'm your host, Chef Whitney Aronoff, and today I have the pleasure of having Dr. Matt Dorsey on the podcast with me today. Dr. Matt Dorsey describes himself as being medically bilingual, since the Eastern and Western medical systems are essentially different languages. He spent the last 12 years studying and practicing Eastern medicine, clinical nutrition, acupuncture, herbology, pharmacology, QiGong, psychology, and anything else that falls under the umbrella of integrative medicine. He can approach any health condition using a variety of different lenses, although he draws most heavily on his training in Western clinical nutrition, herbology, lifestyle medicine, acupuncture, and biochemistry. Dr. Dorsey works as the Chief Scientific Officer and Formulator for CHOQ and runs his own practice working one-on-one with clients through the East-West Alchemist. Hello, Matt.
Hi there.
How you doing today?
Thanks for having me here. This is going to be fun. Doing pretty great. Excellent.
I'm really excited to talk to you and learn from you today. You have such an incredible background, and I really admire and I'm really intrigued by the work that you're doing now. So can you tell me briefly a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, for sure. Well, 13 years ago, just over that, I moved up to Austin from Houston to study Chinese medicine. Before that, I got my bachelor's of science in psychology. And I was actually thinking for a while that I was going to do a master's in psychology, maybe even become a therapist or possibly do experimental. But at some point, I got some acupuncture and it was kind of life-changing, and decided to start getting into studying just, in a layperson sense, studying Chinese medicine and doing QiGong and things like that. And eventually I was like, well, this seems to be the way to go for me. So that was kind of the beginning. And then it's just been a whole adventure from there.
So how did you transition from acupuncture and Eastern medicine into supplements and learning about supplements and educating people about supplements?
Yeah, well, it actually was kind of a perfect situation because it was almost as if I was getting 2 degrees at once. Because when I was here at AOMA, Graduate School of Integrative Medicine in Austin, getting my degree, my master's in Chinese medicine, I actually got a job at Whole Foods selling supplements. And not just any Whole Foods, but the Whole Foods World Headquarters in downtown Austin, which had back then a very large department, almost 30 people. For a department that small, it's pretty big. Yeah. And so I tell people jokingly, half jokingly, it's almost like the Harvard medicine of supplement retail trading, because every single rep from all the big companies was there 24/7, since we're the headquarters, and there were tons and tons of free trainings. So it was like every weekend it was another training by another company. And so, yeah, and there were some very experienced people there who kind of took me under their wing and also taught me. And so, yeah, the whole time I was in school, virtually the whole time I was in school, it would be over here learning Chinese medicine and also just general physiology and all that. And then the Chinese herbology and acupuncture. And then over here, I'd be all about just supplements 24/7, how vitamins, nutrients work, how supplements are made, all that stuff. So I kind of got all of that at the same time, so it worked out pretty perfectly. And I kind of, toward the end of the program, a lot of my professors who didn't know as much about Western supplements would actually rely on me as the sort of like on-campus resource. I was like the vitamin expert, by the time I was about to finish the program, because they knew that, like, they'd be like, oh, DLA is the great omega-3. And I'd be like, actually, it's an omega-6, like just little things like that. So yeah, but I got very lucky to have that perfect situation where I was like constantly learning at work and school.
So what's the difference between Western supplements and Eastern herbs and supplements and tinctures?
Yeah. Well, in the Chinese herbal tradition, there are, a couple of, at least a couple hundred that we learn in school, but there's even more than that. And then tons of different formulas, but it's all just straight herbs. So, when you get a degree in Chinese medicine, you don't learn about like how to use N-acetylcysteine, you know what I mean? Like, it's a total other realm, basically. And so your average acupuncturist, unless that acupuncturist has had training specifically outside of, like I have, in vitamins and minerals, we're not actually taught about that really hardly at all in school, but many of us do have a passion for this stuff and learn it through other channels. So, but yeah, just straight herbology. And then over here you have herbs, but you also have vitamins, minerals, amino acids, all sorts of other stuff too.
So, how does a doctor practicing Eastern or Western medicine, how or where do they go to study supplementation?
Yeah, that's that's a tough one, really. I mean, there's a bunch of different certifications you can get. I haven't looked through all of them to see which which ones are the strongest in terms of supplements, because a lot of people with training in just general nutrition, even if you get a bachelor's in nutrition, they're not really usually going to teach you that much about supplements.
Yeah.
There are registered dietitians out there who barely know anything about supplements. They might know about the biochemistry of like vitamin A or C or something, or they'll know about that. But as far as like understanding the nitty gritty of it, it can be hard to find that training. Sometimes the best training really is actually just working in the industry for a long time.
Yeah. So, what's the purpose of taking a supplement?
Yeah, that's it's also kind of a tough one. I mean, it can be all over the place, right? If you're being guided by an actual medical practitioner,
Mhm.
then the purpose is going to be specific to what you have going on, whatever imbalances are going on, right? And to ensure that, like it's going to be a bit more serious that way. And then, like with CHOQ, for example, we're kind of a lifestyle brand. We like to use a lot of adaptogens. We use things that help to provide healthy energy, mood, focus, things like that. So a lot of supplements, people take for just the basics, right? Like I just want to feel better. I want to have better energy. I want to maybe have a better stress response, things like that. So that's the kind of stuff we especially like to do with CHOQ. But yeah, I mean, the purpose can be all over the place, it just depends on what you're trying to do, because it's such a broad category, supplements. It includes so many
Mhm.
different things, like thousands and thousands of different things in there. So really it can be just about anything if you find the right thing.
So, so I feel like, you and I briefly talked about this in the past. You hear a lot of practitioners dropping medical grade, like, the supplements I have are medical grade versus these supplements here, if you're just walking into a grocery store, they're not going to be as powerful, quote unquote, as what I'm offering. What is that term? Over the
Yeah.
counter supplements versus medical grade supplements. Is that something we need to know about or understand?
Yeah, and that's a funny one. It's not really a real term in a sense. It has basically no definition, and so it kind of means whatever you want it to mean. It's almost more of a marketing term. But I have also worked at an integrative medicine pharmacy here in Austin as a practitioner, and many of the brands they carry do tend to be more potent. They'll use a more potent molecular form of a particular nutrient. For example, brands that say that they're more professional grade, the brands that are like more commonly carried in like a chiropractor's office or something like that, right? Those brands will use like a magnesium glycinate or a taurate. They will never ever use a magnesium oxide because they know the difference. Whereas if you grab a random product off the shelf at Walgreens or something, you're going to get the dirt cheap, low bioavailability form like oxide. That's actually like more of a laxative, actually, because it's not bound to an amino acid and it's harder for the body to recognize. And so, but as far as an actual strict definition, that doesn't exist. It really is more of a marketing term. In Europe, though, I did just realize, thinking about this for a second, in Europe, they actually do have prescription supplements. Certain things you have to get prescription in Europe. And the trade-off is you're trading the freedom of being able to get supplements like you could in other countries like the US, right? Whatever you want over the counter. But then the trade-off, the win of that is that the quality standards are exceptionally high.
Mhm.
And there's going to be a lot more labs done on these. They're probably going to be more pure, things like that. So a little bit of trade-off. But yeah, but there isn't really any specific definition. So I just, I could say, maybe just since we're on this topic, a few things you want to look out for if you want to see if a supplement is more pro or not, generally speaking, on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Uh, what form are the nutrients in? So for example, folic acid is a garbage form of folate, not fit for human consumption. It shouldn't even be in any supplements. It should be illegal. It's so bad. And then methylfolate or folinic acid, or something like that, would be a real form that actually helps you. And most people, though, it's hard to know because you have to really have training in this. to know all these different, because it just looks like Greek basically when you read, when you're reading the label, you're like, I have no idea what this like 13 syllable word is, like it's super confusing. That's one thing. Another thing is dosing, active dosing. So for example, with CHOQ, we do full disclosure labeling so that you can always see the exact amount of each thing in there, whereas other companies will use proprietary blends where you can't. If a company uses a proprietary blend, that allows them to hide the amount of each individual herbal extract, for example, to where you don't know how much of each you're getting. And you could be getting a microdose, like 1/100th of a dose on some of these. And that's actually common to save money. So that's more professional to see everything spelled out where they're telling you the exact amount, because then you can verify that they're using an actual active amount that's going to do something. So more like evidence-based dosing. And then the last thing I'll say, just a little tip for people, if you want to find a more pro-grade supplement, you want to find something that's going to be ideally using herbal extracts primarily, and not just raw herbal powders, because an herbal extract can be dozens or maybe even over 100 times the potency sometimes as just a pure herbal powder. So people will say, like, for example, I'll have a client and they'll say, oh, I got cat's claw. And I'm like, well, did you get the specific one I recommended? I'm like, no, I didn't get the one you recommended. I just got another one. I was like, well, let's take a look and see if it actually is halfway decent at all. And a lot of the time it's just a regular, just cat's claw powdered in a capsule. That's not the same as an extract. Very, very different. So that's another one too. So yeah, just a few tips for how to kind of differentiate, on the spectrum of more pro versus just kind of entry level and bargain basement kind of bottom of the barrel stuff, Yeah.
Oh, and that's the information I think that we all want as consumers. I think, I always am looking for quality over quantity. So
Absolutely.
If I'm going to spend my money on a supplement, I want to make sure that I'm getting one that's safe for my body, but also is going to upgrade and support the reason why I'm reaching for it. So
Exactly.
Just to recap, because when you go anywhere and look at supplements, whether it's in person or online, it's overwhelming when you see the number of brands. And I think we all are trying to read labels so we find brands that we trust. But it sounds like what we need to be looking for is making sure that they don't list a proprietary blend, that they're upfront with the ingredients. And then there were two other tips there real quick, herbal, and one other thing that we need to be looking for.
Yeah. So an herbal extract is going to be usually superior to just a regular herbal powder. So that, and just to clarify for anybody who doesn't know, so you can take an herb and you can just powder it, right? Dry it up, grind it up, put it in a capsule, just ready to go. And that's fine. It will still help, but it's not the same as taking that powder and then actually running it through a water or an alcohol extraction or CO2 or whatever else it is to pull the active compounds out. It's going to be more absorbable that way. And also oftentimes, just one extra little side note, they will often be the more professional companies will call them, we call them standardized extracts is what they will use. Meaning that, for example, I'll just pick a CHOQ product here. So like Apex Glutathione, we use milk thistle, but then if you look at the milk thistle on here, it's actually going to say specifically that it's standardized to a certain percentage of silymarin, which is it's a category of phytochemicals, right? Meaning that each batch is sent to a lab and they've analyzed it to make sure there's a minimum amount of certain active phytochemicals. So that's also, that's a big one too. So just figured I'd throw that in there since that's like kind of the next level.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you're mentioning was just the molecular form. That's what I call it. And just to explain that. So when somebody says, how much magnesium should I take? Instead of telling them the answer first, I say, which of the 10 different magnesiums are you talking about? Right. So there's oxide, sulfate, glycinate, threonate, taurate. It just keeps going, right? And these are all different molecules. It's a magnesium, it's the element magnesium, but it's attached to something else. And that changes the pharmacokinetic properties, the bioavailability, changes where it goes in the body. Certain forms are more prone to getting into the brain or better for calming than others. So taurate and threonate, and then certain forms, just like I mentioned, are just really, really cheap. You can get a huge barrel from China for $5, and they just don't absorb very well. The oxide is a particularly not so great one. And actually, if you want to, I do have a blog on this. If anyone wants to learn more, it's called 3 Easy Ways to Tell If Your Supplement is Junk.
Yes.
And that is on the CHOQ website. And then I have another blog I did recently on the proprietary blends that goes really deep into that. And it's just called simply Why Proprietary Blends Suck. And that's another good one just to educate yourself and help you make better decisions when you're shopping for supplements.
Thank you. So you opened up a great point, magnesium. It's like the popular supplement to be adding into your lifestyle. Can you go over the types of magnesium that you recommend your clients avoid? You mentioned, I
Yeah.
think, magnesium oxide. Is there any others that we should veer away from because there's better versions out there that we should be reaching for?
Yeah. So magnesium oxide is an F. I like to just grade stuff on like it's a paper or something.
Yeah.
That's an a C would be magnesium citrate. Not too bad, not the best. More irritating to the stomach. Citric acid has its own problems, but it's more bioavailable. It's not as bad. And then you're getting into like the high B's, low A's. You're getting like glycinate, for example, is a really good one. And then like AA plus is like taurate and threonate. Threonate is a patented, relatively new form that really likes to get into the brain specifically, and actually has some clinical research on it showing it enhances focus and things like that. It's more expensive, but it's a pretty cool one. And then taurate, I use taurate primarily for general purposes. It also is a little bit more neuroavailable, similar to the threonate, but it's great for general purposes. And taurine itself is actually active. So if you can bind a mineral to some kind of amino acid or organic acid like taurate, then what's going to happen is not only are you enhancing the bioavailability, but you're getting the effects of the active compound taurine. And a lot of people associate taurine with Red Bull. And so they think it's like a stimulant or something, but it's actually not. Taurate has a gentle calming effect. It's a GABAergic, but also it's good for your heart, helps protect your liver, has other cool properties too. So I like the taurate for multiple reasons.
I like your grading scale. That's actually really helpful. Yeah. A good way to comprehend everything under the magnesium umbrella.
Right. Yeah.
Do you like using salt baths to absorb magnesium?
Yeah, I mean, that can be great as an adjunct. I wouldn't recommend it as your primary way because you want to get regular, consistent dosing. And so it's like, how many baths per week do you take, but as a secondary way of getting more magnesium in your system, yeah, that can be great. And by the way, magnesium sulfate is what they use for that's what Epsom salt is, that's what you use for the bath. And sulfate is great for, transdermal, like you're in the bath, but it's not very good to use internally, and it's actually a hardcore laxative. And so
interesting.
If you take a lot of magnesium sulfate, it's actually, some people will do that for cleansing, for example. So that's not really good for internal use at all, but unless you're trying to have a laxative effect.
So when you go to a health food store, you'll see that there's a variety of different magnesium sulfates to put in your bath, or just salts to put in your bath. How do you decide what's safe to actually soak in the tub if your number one goal is to absorb magnesium that way and ease your muscles? Do you just go for real salt? Do you go for Dead Sea salt? Or do you go for the one that's labeled magnesium sulfate?
Yeah, well, so magnesium, I would go for the magnesium just because people need more magnesium, and it's a nice way to get it right, close to the muscles and all that, and just relax you. But of course, there's many other different kinds of, I'm not an expert in bath bombs necessarily, but they do like to put cool herbs in there sometimes. And I've even seen CBD bath bombs. And so all sorts of other cool stuff in there. The Dead Sea salt, I'm sure, has some beneficial properties. There's going to be a lot of different minerals in there, but it's not going to be as specific as like a magnesium, which is going to relax your whole body and mind, pretty rapidly there. Pairs well with lavender, I would say, for that purpose. Lavender is a great one.
Interesting. Why do you think it pairs well with lavender?
Well, because they have similar properties. They're kind of synergistic. Lavender, just really good for chilling you out. There's some lavender extracts out there that they're actually quite potent for calming.
So how does a person who wants to start taking supplements, or maybe already is, how does one figure out what you need and the right combination?
Ideally, you want to work with a professional who really knows what they're doing. And those can be harder to find than you might think. Because there aren't really that many programs people can go through that really help them master supplements. There's some out there, but it's just, it's hard to really to get to the top level of expertise in this. It's relatively difficult, but a lot of people just kind of use their own blend of intuition and research, and also talking to the person in the aisle, at the Whole Foods or the Sprouts or whatever, about the different properties and things like that. But, of course, being a professional, I would endorse talking to a professional just because you're going to get much better results as long as you find somebody who knows what they're doing. It's really, really challenging though.
It is.
For somebody to put together a regimen that is really dialed in for them as an individual. Very challenging. And some people are great researchers, but I mean, no matter how good of a researcher you are, if you don't have the basic training in physiology, you're going to oversimplify things, so yeah, it's kind of, sometimes it's almost like asking the question like, hey, what's the best way for me to like completely upgrade my car internally and externally all by myself, right? Like, how do I like figure out how to install a new stereo and also like put in a new transmission and like, take out the headlights? And you're like, well, you can do that, but it's going to take a lot of training. You might just want to outsource that, but when it comes to, if you're not trying to just do a whole bunch of very intense stuff and work with a bunch of things, if you're just looking for just general boosts in energy and, things like that, then if you go with the category of adaptogens, then it's harder to go wrong because adaptogens tend to have this kind of homeostatic function where they kind of bring you into the middle, like that. And as long as they're taking in a normal dosage, they're usually quite gentle and, have fewer kind of contraindications usually. And so, yeah, things like ashwagandha, tongkat ali, shilajit, stuff like that. Anything that's kind of similar to ginseng, in that adaptogen tonic category. Those, most people, will do pretty well on some of those. And so it's maybe less specific. You might not need to like, have as much detail going on to try something like that, just to see if it helps you.
How does one recognize that the supplements they are taking aren't actually supporting them?
Yeah. Well, if you don't have training in this stuff, or not prone to really researching really in a detailed way, you won't be able to know rationally whether that's happening or not. You'll have no idea, unfortunately. And also we have to remember placebo effect is a huge thing too. And so, sometimes you might be taking a supplement that's not actually doing anything, but you might be getting a lot out of it because you think that it's doing something, and placebo effect is extremely powerful. So that's always a factor. But I guess that if you're trying to see if something is helping you or not, you have to have some way of measuring the effects. So for example, and most people nobody's going to do this hardly, but you could, for example, if you wanted to be a little bit more scientific about it to see if something's actually helping, let's say you're taking some supplements for energy, right? Let's say you've got like a stack, right? You've got like 3 products together that are all like, like you got your crazy adaptogen stack, and someone's like, take these 3 things and you'll get energy, right? You could rate your energy on a scale of 1 to 10 every day on like a little journal, and then you could just average it out and see if it changes, but a lot of the time people aren't going to track these very well. And you can have a general sense of if you feel better or not, but the average person, I can say as a medical practitioner, the average person does not track changes in their body very well at all. It's very common as a practitioner. I've talked to other ones about this too, where somebody will come in when they first see you and their pain will be like an 8 and their energy level will be like a 2. And then 3 months later, the energy level is bumped up to like a 6 and their pain is down to a 5. And they will literally look you in the eye and tell you nothing has changed. You're like, well, that's the reason that I record what's happening each time you come in. And then they're like, oh, actually, I do feel a lot better. I just forgot. So people do not track what's going on in their bodies at all, hardly, for the most part. Some people are more aware, though. In general, women tend to be a lot more aware. Men are, I think, probably much less so in my experience. Not true across the board, but most of my clients happen to be female for whatever reason. And generally more sensitive, more aware of what's going on inside. But it's difficult. It's really difficult because, again, you got the placebo thing, you got the inability to track what's going on in your body thing, lack of scientific rigor in terms of writing it down and recording it, like you would in a real study. And so, plus you got just intuition and other more nebulous things like that. So it's tough. But if you're taking a really powerful stack, like if an expert gives you like 5 or 6 things all to take together to get you better energy or to support mood or whatever, and then you notice like, my God, I'm like a different person in like less than a week, which is common, right? We're like, wow, then it's going to be obvious. And so when you take a full stack together all at once, then it's going to be less subtle. If you just take like a little bit of ashwagandha, that can be great. but it's going to be subtler and you might not realize anything's happening. Could be like a slow, gradual thing where you just have no idea. But if you take a big, powerful stack, then, it's going to also reinforce like, oh, hey, this is doing something for me because it's so obvious. That's why I like to usually suggest, stacks for people.
Interesting. Is there a particular adaptogen or combination of adaptogens that you're finding you're prescribing a lot to clients right now?
So as far as adaptogens go, some of my favorites are ashwagandha and Shilajit. Those are at the very top. But there are tons of them out there. Ashwagandha is one of the best places to start for anybody who just kind of is just like, I just want to try something that's going to just generally enhance my quality of life, help with energy, mood, hormones, stress chemistry, stuff like that. So yeah, ashwagandha is great. Shilajit I like a lot because it does help in some of those other areas similar to the ashwagandha, but it also is great for mitochondrial energy production. So it helps your cells make energy from calories, make ATP. That's a really cool one too. Also helps boost collagen. So, popular with women, but of course everybody needs collagen for lots of different reasons, not just beauty. But yeah, there's so many. Jiaogulan is another one, also known as gynostemma. That's a Chinese herb. That's another one of my favorite ones. A lot of similar properties. The other adaptogens also good for brain function. And it does boost glutathione production, actually. And I'm kind of obsessed with glutathione. I formulated a glutathione supplement that I have Jiaogulan in for CHOQ. But yeah, I'd say those are maybe some of my top ones.
So why are you passionate about glutathione?
Glutathione is a really big deal. It is, first of all, the molecule that your body produces that attaches to different toxins that shouldn't be in your body. Anything that's not supposed to be there, it's heavy metal or plastic, whatever. Oftentimes glutathione is involved. Most of the time it's involved in the detoxification of that, just shuttling it out of the body safely. And so we are kind of in this, like, we are swimming in this like toxic soup 24/7 pretty much. That's just how it is, unfortunately. There's just like tens of thousands of novel compounds with minimal safety research that are just everywhere. Everybody watching this has probably measurable PFAs in their blood. That's a big one that's taking off right now. People knowing more about that. Phthalates, which is the plasticizer. There's research on that. And a lot of these affect hormones too, just FYI. So if somebody's looking for hormone support, you want to make sure you are limiting your limiting your intake of these poisons, but also getting them out. That's number one thing glutathione is recognized for. It's also an immunomodulator. It has profound effects on the immune system, helps to provide balance between these two different sort of branches in a sense of what's called Th1 and Th2 cells and cytokines. And that stands for T helper cell. But if anyone's ever heard, there's this idea of having balance between Th1 and Th2 responses. And when you have more balance in there, then the immune system not just works harder necessarily, but more smarter, you could say. But yeah, and then other than that, glutathione is a master antioxidant. Every cell in your body needs glutathione to work, and your body's generating tons of free radicals 24/7. But these poisons that are everywhere, they generate free radicals, they act as free radicals, and they also tend to sap our glutathione. So that the more toxins we have coming in, the harder it's going to be for our body to create enough glutathione to keep up with it. But the glutathione, very, very important, even for dealing with free radicals generated by your own body in just a normal process. That happens all the time. Our immune system uses reactive oxygen species, which is a fancy way of saying free radicals, as weapons against, the not so friendly parts of the microbiome. Microbiome, I mean like your whole body, not just the gut, like the microbiome with a capital M, But anyway, so we do need to deal with free radicals. Antioxidants, kind of a buzzword that a lot of people don't really understand quite, but it is very important because your body is constantly dealing with these free radicals, and the free radicals destroy tissues. That's just what they do. And they are literally, like I said, they're weapons used by microorganisms to fight each other because they destroy tissues. So if your body will actually, like if this is a cell, your body will actually tack on glutathione groups to the outside of the cell, like shielding, like armor, to prevent against collateral damage when it's fighting the critters. It's fascinating. And so, if a free radical comes along, it's going to be basically neutralized by that glutathione right there. It's not going to destroy your own cell. But yeah, glutathione is amazing. It just has so many different properties. And I think that because of our toxic lifestyle and how we're living, we need a lot of it. Yeah.
Yeah, our environments right now definitely make it a little bit different, where we need to bring in some support in different places to kind of counterbalance what we're experiencing outside and inside.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
there's a lot more chemicals than people are aware of. You can't see them, but they are
Oh
unfortunately
yeah.
everywhere right now.
Yeah, and I haven't really gotten into this, but there are some labs you can do. Great Plains Labs has like a chemical toxicity panel that I think it looks for, maybe it's at least 100. It might be actually even more than that, like maybe 200 different chemicals in your blood.
Wow.
And yeah, I've actually thought about maybe just running one on myself just for fun, just to see what's in there, But yeah, all sorts of stuff you can look for and you can find in there.
So you have such an interesting career and job. You run your practice, East-West Alchemist, where you see clients one-on-one, but you also work as the Chief Scientific Officer and Formulator for CHOQ, which
Yeah, sure.
is probably one of the coolest job titles I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more what you do as the Chief Scientific Officer and Formulator? What does that
Sure.
entail?
Yeah, no problem. Well, so Chief Scientific Officer, that's a term that you tend to find in any company where they need a technical person, so it could be anything. It could be a software company, it could be a car company, or just a computer company, whatever it is, but you're the technical person there, you're the science person, So anytime there's a science question, or anytime science is involved in the process of creating a product, then that's kind of your forte, which makes sense, since I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and also just kind of a geek, that's kind of that's where I go, right? So yeah, I guess in a sense I lead product development, so I make sure that that we've got the right things in there, that they're being sourced well, that we're using the right kinds of ingredients that have good labs on them, and that are going to be combining well to achieve an effect. So right now I'm formulating a pre-workout, for example, for CHOQ, and it's a lot of fun. Like, formulating is crazy. You get to guinea pig on yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so, when you create something and it's like way too strong, for example, and then you have like a mini panic attack because you just overdosed yourself on herbs, right? That's part of the process. It really is. You're like, okay, well, I need to dial that down. That's too much, So it's a lot of fun, but yeah, anything involving science, basically. The customer service team will send me questions. If there's anything that they can't handle, it's really technical, they'll send me something, and I'll, give my best response for our customers. And also, I produce content too. So I do videos on our Instagram. I do a lot of blogs, things like that. And so, try to also include some of the research in the content that I produce as well.
Yeah, you guys provide great content to help just people understand the complex world that we're living in, and how important it is to really take care of yourself if you just want to enjoy your life. So
Definitely.
I appreciate your content.
Nice. Glad you enjoy it. Yeah. Maybe let's check it out. It's Get CHOQ, GETCHOQ on Instagram. And I do lives there, at least, 2, 3, 4 times a week.
I will check out your lives. I haven't caught that yet. That'll be really good. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are some of your favorite supplements that you're taking right now that you're really enjoying, that are making you feel good?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, so speaking of which, this is the old label. It looks a little bit cooler now, but Apex Glutathione. This is my favorite CHOQ product. This is my number one. I put a lot of research into this one. This is actually 12 ingredients that all work together to optimize the glutathione system. So it has preformed glutathione in there, already ready to go. But then it has a bunch of different ingredients, vitamins, minerals, and herbal extracts that help your body create more of its own glutathione, and then also make sure that the glutathione is being recycled so that it's used more times before it's used up. It's also a nootropic. So it has ginkgo in there, has bacopa in there, has javelin in there. And so those are all going to be great for the brain, and they actually boost, some of these herbs boost glutathione production in the brain. And so, that's important if you want to be making sure you're getting toxins out of the brain. But yeah, so this is kind of like a mood and memory and focus support on top of, detox and immunity. So this is my favorite. But of course I made it, so I would say that. And then, Shilajit's another top one. This guy right here. This is totally amazing. It's our top seller for a good reason. It's an old school Ayurvedic adaptogen. It's not technically an herb, it's an herbal mineral. It's kind of confusing. It's taken actually from mountains, and it's the result of the breakdown of plants mixing with minerals over a long period of time. Has a lot of fulvic acid in it. Fulvic acid is really great for, helps with detox, but all sorts of other cool properties. And it's great for, like I mentioned before, mitochondrial energy production. So there's a compound in there called, urolithin A. There we go. And urolithin A is almost like a CoQ10-like compound. It helps with mitochondrial function. So great for energy, great for brain function, and also has some properties to support healthy testosterone levels for men, or just general support for women. So love the Shilajit.
I love it too. I find it really helps with cognitive activity. I feel like it just makes me a little bit sharper.
Absolutely. No, it sure does. And then, and also I will say, like, be a little bit careful with Shilajits. The one that we sell is one of the only ones that's actually, or I think it's the only one still, this particular trademarked version of Shilajit that has research on it. It's the only one that Health Canada actually allows to be sold, because with Shilajits, you have to be careful with heavy metals. You have to make sure that the right labs have been done to make sure that there are very low levels. Unfortunately, saying no metals is almost impossible with respect to anything anymore, because there's always going to be micro amounts because they're just everywhere, but very low so that they're in a safe range. But yeah, so be a little bit careful with the Shilajits. There are a lot of them that are actually like not even legal to sell in Canada. They have higher quality standards in Canada than they do in the United States. And then the next one, and these three are kind of part of almost like a brain, like nootropic type stack, I would say. They kind of go together. Action 2.0. This one right here is awesome. This one is, you can use it for pre-workout, for energy, but mood, focus, all that, also mitochondria. And it's got wild-crafted Siberian rhodiola in it. Rhodiola is a great brain booster, but also a lot of athletes like it for enhancing endurance. And just a great mood booster as well. It does help to support like healthy levels of neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, things like that. But yeah, those three go really well together. As far as CHOQ products, those are my personal top three. But generally speaking too, I could tell you a few others like that are really just like essential for me. Magnesium taurate, that's essential. Algae omega-3, love that. Don't like the fish oil as much because the algae, you're able to get just a higher margin of safety because of the metals. But anyway, and then methylfolate. I take a decent amount of methylfolate because folate is so important for so many things in the body. And I do have a little bit of the MTHFR and some of those folate mutations.
Which magnesium do you like? Is it a CHOQ magnesium brand, or is it another magnesium brand?
Well, we don't have a magnesium yet, but I recommend finding a good magnesium taurate for general use. And then the dose range is kind of like 300 to 600 milligrams, typically with the taurate. That's elemental, which means of actual magnesium, not of the whole molecule. But usually the elemental dose will be the one that's on the front of the package.
So where do you recommend people go if they want to learn more about supplementation? Is there a place where someone can start to educate themselves safely?
That's really difficult. Okay, there's a guy named Andrew Saul. He's also called the Mega Vitamin Man. When I was first in school, this guy's been around for forever. When I was first in school, I found some of his stuff. He had this website. I think it's still around. It's called dryourself.com. And I learned a lot about vitamins and minerals specifically from him. He's less of an herb guy, but really, really into learning about how to use vitamin megadose therapy and all sorts of different stuff. So that's a great resource for vitamins and minerals and supplements like that. It's really tough though. There aren't that many. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Examine.com. If you want to type in an herb or a nutrient and get a whole bunch of science on it and with a nice summary of the effects, examine.com is actually pretty good. I'm just remembering them now. And let's see if there's anything else I can think of. Mercola has some good stuff, but just tons and tons of articles on there. I don't go there that often, but there's definitely have read some of his stuff in the past and gotten a lot out of some of his articles. And then we do have some blogs, obviously, as I mentioned, on the CHOQ website. I think that the best, like, if you just for quality, just read that one blog called 3 Easy Ways to Tell If Your Supplement is Junk. That's just a really nice like primer of what to look for. And that right there can help you like incredibly. I have a list also in there that's in red. So you can just scroll down to where it's red. And it's a list of every single one of the like questionable forms of vitamins and minerals, like folic acid, magnesium oxide, zinc oxide, DL alpha tocopherol for vitamin E, all the forms that if you see this on a label, you don't want to buy it, you know?
That's great.
That's just really handy.
Yeah. That's one that you take a screenshot of and you keep in your phone and will help you anytime that you're shopping. So thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. Just look at the supplements facts panel. If you see any of those on there, that basically means that the company doesn't care about the quality of their products pretty much at all. That's just kind of I'm pretty hardcore about that as a practitioner. You know, when I was seeing people in an office, I work remotely now, but when I was seeing people in an office, they would line all their supplements up on my desk, you know, and I would look through each one of them and I would actually say, I'd be like, this one goes in the trash. Okay. And they would just throw it right there in the trash in my office.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you have to be careful with this stuff. And some of these nutrients, they're not necessarily toxic. They just don't work very well, you know, whereas the other ones are actually toxic. Folic acid is actually outright toxic. I try to make as many public service announcements as possible because a lot of people are still behind the times on this, but folic acid is not real folate. I just call it like pseudofolate basically. And in a lot of people, it actually behaves like antifolate. Not only is it not working, but it builds up as unmetabolized folic acid in the blood, which can be measured and actually antagonizes the folate system. And so some of the research that was done on high dose folate that was showing that it was bad for you and, you know, caused like, you know, issues with your prostate, with, you know, making you more prone to cancer, things like that. That's because it was being done on folic acid. Most people don't realize. So they think that, oh, high dose folate is bad. No, high dose real folate is great. High dose folic acid is actually a toxin.
And high dose folic acid is what is recommended to women who are pregnant.
Well, not usually high dose, usually lower dose, like 800 micrograms is the standard dose for recommended pregnant women. Usually that's what you find. And that's the exact dose you find in most, you know, kind of like generic, you know, off the shelf at a drugstore multivitamins for pregnant women. But I will say that, you know, just real quick, just to be totally accurate here, folic acid can still work as a folate. You know, it's not that it's not going to work at all. It's also, but part of it is that everyone's different. And these genes the main one's called MTHFR. There's also other ones that regulate folate metabolism, FOLR1, FOLR2, there's a few others. And when you do one of these fancy gene panels at your functional medicine clinic or whatever, you know, they're going to tell you which of these genes are mutated to where they don't work as well. And basically, long story short, the more of these mutations you have in these folate genes, the more susceptible you are to folic acid being a toxin for you and not working. Theoretically, if you don't have any of these mutations, then the folic acid may work quite a bit better. But of course, you know, why risk it? Why not just get the real thing? You know, it's gonna be better for everybody. But yeah. The pregnant women thing, yeah, absolutely. Like, anytime I have a pregnant client, I'm like, no, you were absolutely not taking folic acid. And unfortunately, just a lot of folks are behind the times in that. So I try to tell as many people as possible to avoid folic acid. It's a really big deal. I mean, you need it to make sure your genes are not mutating.
Wow.
And, you know, and which is why, you know, with respect to pregnancy, you know, you have spina bifida and genetic deformities in children who are born with folate deficiency. And unfortunately, that kind of stuff is irreversible because when your cells are dividing, you know, all of those genes from the parent cell have to be sort of copied and pasted, you know, accurately, you know, and this is happening like crazy in a developing fetus. And so you want to make sure that every time that's happening, every time you have cell division, that the genes are being transferred accurately, you know. And anyway, so yeah, so preventing genetic mutation is one of the top things that folate does, but it also works on neurotransmitter synthesis. So folate is huge for mood, creates a compound called BH4 tetrahydrobiopterin that you need for serotonin and dopamine. So folate is being used for natural mood support a lot now. And you need it for glutathione. That's why I have methylfolate in Apex glutathione, feeds into the glutathione system. Your T cells need folate. It does a little bit of everything. It's really important. So you do want your levels to be optimal for sure.
Can you get folate through food?
Yeah. So for those of y'all who don't know, folate, it gets its name from foliage. And so it's found in leafy greens. And so I eat a ridiculous amount of spinach on top of taking methylfolate. Spinach is great. And by the way, like if you make smoothies, hopefully a lot of y'all do, put a bunch of spinach in all your smoothies. Great way to get extra folate. Other stuff in there too, but the folate, yeah. So leafy greens are going to be your main sources of folate, but you can find it in lots of stuff, but that's the best way to do it.
That's a great way to help people comprehend where to find it from. Folate and foliage.
Yep, foliage, exactly. Yeah,
Amazing.
Leafy greens.
So
yeah.
You're a complete wealth of information. Like I've learned so much chatting with you. If somebody is still feeling like very overwhelmed by the supplement world and they really want to figure out what to take that's right for their body and in balanced, can somebody reach out to you and work with you directly?
Yeah, you're welcome to do that. Absolutely. My website is drdorsey.com. And that redirects you to my main site, which is called East-West-Alchemist.com, which is the name of my practice, But yeah, just Dr. Dorsey, that's that doctor is in DRDORSEY.com. I always like to make the disclaimer too. I'm not an MD, I'm a DACM. So I'm not a medical doctor, although my initials are MD, Matt Dorsey. So that's kind of funny. It's almost like I was put here by the universe to become a doctor, But I always make that disclaimer because a lot of people have this weird programming, like the only real doctor is an MD, which that actually comes from some weird stuff that happened 100 years ago, anti-natural medicine propaganda campaign, but that's another story. But yeah, so just like let people know, like I don't prescribe pharmaceuticals. I don't, I can't do that. Like that's not in my scope of practice. But yeah, drdorsey.com. The easiest way to reach me. And then of course, for CHOQ supplements, just CHOQ.com, CHOQ.com. Check out our Instagram, get CHOQ, also a lot of action on there.
A lot of action on there. I love it.
I never got to explain my weird stuff here. I don't know if you want me to tell people.
I was just about to ask. Yeah. So for anyone that's watching this on YouTube, you can see it. If you're just listening to the podcast on iTunes or Spotify, Matt is wearing a certain type of glasses, and he also has acupuncture needles in his head right now. Oh, now I can really see them. All right. Yeah. So tell me about your glasses and the particular needle points that you have in them.
Well, yeah, I figured I'd just go full weirdo mode for this interview because, why not? Whatever. So the glasses, these are blue blocking glasses. They block the blue frequencies, and I don't use them that often, but I use it today for a few reasons. One, the main reason people use them is to block artificial light. And if I'm staring at a screen for long periods of time, I will feel much better if I have these on. I don't use them as much during the day while I'm working. Because I don't know, sometimes it's just weird to have everything be a different color. But for something like this, if I want to like be looking at the screen for like an hour straight or however long, and I want to still have good focus, this is helpful. It has a calming effect on your brain. When I've worked in places like, like that pharmacy I worked in for a little bit, for example, they had horrific fluorescent lights everywhere and not enough natural light coming in. And when I would put these on, I would instantly feel calmer within seconds. Just like the fluorescent lights I'm kind of sensitive to them. They cause this sort of like low level anxiety in my nervous system. And as soon as I put these on, it has a calming effect. But also like in terms of color therapy, orange it's kind of a social, bright, happy, conversational kind of color. And so it's kind of ideal for a podcast. I actually looked up the properties in color therapy right before the podcast, because I was thinking, yeah, I always feel kind of better and more conversation when I put these on. And I'm wondering if that is part of it. And yeah, actually, theoretically anyway, it is. And then the needles. So I actually was a little bit like not quite at 100% today. I just felt like an extra tired when I got up. Who knows? Maybe there's like pollen going on or whatever it is, And I thought, well, I want to make sure that I'm like on it for the podcast, that because I don't want to like be like taking long pauses where I'm looking for words, and just kind of would like my brain to be functioning 100%. And of course, I took a ridiculous amount of supplements to make sure that happened. But in addition to that, I use these 5 acupuncture points called Sishin Song, and we use these basically to enhance mental clarity. And it also corresponds to the crown chakra. It's basically the crown chakra point. And it's 5 points. There's one in the middle, and there's sort of like one on each side, above, below, right, and left. And they all go together.
Almost like a cross.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And they work really well. And it's kind of funny, before a test in Chinese medicine school, you would see all the students with these in. like everybody would be in the student lounge ready to take this huge test, and they would all have these in their heads, and it actually works. And hey, is it placebo? I have no idea, but either way, it's reliable. And basically every time I do this, I feel better mental clarity. And so yeah, that's that. And I was going to take him out before the interview. And I thought, well, maybe this will just be interesting talking point, right? And yeah, so most of the time you probably couldn't see it, but yeah, I'll give you guys one more look if you want to check it out.
Yeah, I wonder how they're activating differently because you aren't resting and someone's coming up behind and activating them. You're moving your mouth, you're moving your head, and so they're constantly being activated. Have you noticed anything different by using them in this way?
Well, a lot of the time when I'm doing this, it's not during a full treatment on myself, because I do full body treatments on myself and then I'm not moving. But usually with a full body treatment, I don't do this full pattern. I usually just do this most of the time while I'm like doing other stuff, and then obviously double checking the floor if any of them fall out, which is always fun. But yeah, so I guess most of the time I'm using them, that they are kind of moving a little bit, but at the same time though, we don't stimulate scalp points as much. And these actually go in perpendicular. And when you insert a needle perpendicular in the scalp, you can stimulate it, but we typically don't. Okay. And there's different schools of thought on stimulation. I like needle stimulation, although there are certain points that you don't ever stimulate really. And then other practitioners use zero stimulation on any needles and still get good results. I think personally, if you do a little more stimulation, it does help. But yeah, so everybody's got a different style on that one.
Well, Matt, one thing I love doing with my guests on the podcast is asking them, if there's just one wellness tip that they can leave the listener to consider adding into their life to improve their well-being. And I was curious if there was maybe one little tip that you think the listener should take away and consider incorporating into their life.
I'm going to give an outside the box one, because there are other foundational ones I could say, like drink more water or whatever, but I think most people, it's just kind of a generic thing to say, and people already know that. Mm-hmm. I would say look at your media diet is essential. So what kinds of media are you consuming? So, if we're talking about toxins, we're talking about toxicity, then, you have to realize that there are also psychotoxins, not just physical toxins, so part of me is hardcore psychologist who looks at things from the mind and not just from the biochemical and physical angle, because the mind game is critical, really important for your health, your overall health. And there's an interplay between the mind and the body. And so thoughts actually do become physical changes in your biochemistry. And that's just, it's not even a hippie like woo-woo thing. It's like just hard science, basically, Thoughts literally change gene expression. They change synthesis of neurotransmitters and hormones and stress hormones. Like an emotional experience has a dramatic effect on your physical body, actually, in real time, within seconds to minutes, you can see changes. So media diet. So, the number one toxin that we have to watch out for that we didn't used to now is overconsumption of social media. So if you're just like mindlessly scrolling constantly, all of the time, and just kind of doing this all the time, which, I do it too, right? I try to be aware of it, but what kinds of, at least if you're going to be on social media for a long time every day, at least make sure that it's well curated and that you're not getting random stuff where it's like angry people just saying weird stuff and fighting with each other, or, even news, even if you've got your trusted news source, whatever that is for you as an individual, whatever news you like, no matter what it is, even if it's one of the better ones that's maybe less mainstream or whatever, still it's too much, so even the people I like to listen to see what's going on, I still titrate my exposure to that, because too much is not good and it will throw you off. And it's all about like the new thing that's happening that you should be alarmed about, like the new thing to freak out about, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's not good. It's not good for your stress hormones. And there's more, just let's look at it in terms of time management too. We spend tons and tons of time watching videos, and so just be more discerning and more careful about the kinds of content you're consuming. And if it's more educational content like this, I think that's definitely much better on the spectrum than like just, here's the new shocking thing. What is your opinion? Everyone's got to have an opinion. Aren't you outraged? Like it's not good to subject yourself to a ton of that, but also, yeah, even just doing a digital detox or whatever once in a while, and going on airplane mode when you're in nature. If you're going to go on a hike and you don't need to use your phone, go on airplane mode. You can still use it as a camera or whatever, but use airplane mode more often, get away from the EMFs, get into nature, so yeah, that I figured that maybe not as many people have heard that as a suggestion. So maybe it'd be more helpful, but just, look at your media diet. How much junk food in the form of media are you consuming? Something that, I think I got that from Daniel Schmachtenberger. He's a really cool guy, kind of a polymath, knows a little bit about everything. And like there is a media equivalent of junk food, so it's just like going to McDonald's or something, or Burger King, and eating trash food. It's trash media, and it has an effect on your mind and on your body. So just be more aware of that, and more selective about it if possible. And it can be a real game changer.
Absolutely. You digest everything that comes into your life. And sometimes if there's too much, you can't digest it. So
Exactly.
it's a great tip.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I could keep you longer asking you more questions, but I think I'd rather just have you back on the podcast another time. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, this was great. I would love to come back. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it. It's always fun doing these things.
Yeah, anytime you have new information that you want to share with us in this community, you are welcome back anytime. So thank you.
Very cool. Yeah, I would love to. Thanks.
All right. Bye, Matt.
All right, take it easy. Thanks.